Hello everyone, back to today's second video. We're going to have a look at the weather next week to 10 days for today's second video. It's takes around the 19th of January, and we'll be able to go a little bit beyond that with the extended GFS, and we'll have a look at the ECM ensembles and the CFS V2 as well. So we're going to be talking about weather the next few weeks, really, not just the weather for the next week to 10 days. So the storyline of this winter so far is that it's been a mild winter up to now for the UK, and temperatures have been quite a bit above average. Well, we have had a few colder days since the new year, but December was a very mild month. And we've had the sudden stratospheric warming, though, in the North Pole. That occurred at the end of December, and we are waiting now to see signs of northern blocking within the model output. We do have those signs of northern blocking within the longer range model output, but we're waiting to see if it starts turning up in the shorter range model output. And that's what we'll be focusing on in not just today's video, but the videos over the next few days, of course. So I'll get on with the video for you very shortly, just to say that the 5-day forecast has been released. Not a particularly interesting 5 days coming up, to be honest. High pressure remains quite close to us, and temperatures will, after a fairly chilly start, become fairly mild. But have a look at that, see what's going on in the next 5 days. We're going to start off with the stratosphere, though. So this is what's happening with the temperature at 10 HPA over the North Pole right now. This is from the JMA. So this is depicting the temperatures in the stratosphere at 10 HPA since the start of the season, which takes us back to the beginning of September, actually. So that's a sudden stratospheric warming that occurred in the final days of December. The temperature from there has lowered, it's dropped, but it's still way above average. And actually, over the last day or so, we have had a little tick up in the temperature at 10 HPA once again. Not getting back to this level it was at when we had the sudden stratospheric warming, but certainly keeping temperatures much warmer than average at 10 HPA. The grey line is kind of like the trend line for this time of the year. You see we are we're well above that even now. If we go down a little bit lower to 30 HPA, this is how things are looking. Again, we do see the sudden stratospheric warming that occurred around the new year at 30 HPA. And that's where we are right now. So again, temperatures have dropped from that peak of the sudden stratospheric warming around New Year. The temperature dropped, but it's just ticking up a little bit now. And it's still way above average, still way above that grey line, which is the trend for this point in the year. So it remains a lot warmer than normal at both 10 and 30 HPA. At the moment, this is how the GFS is picking things up. So that little tick up that we're seeing on those charts at 10 and 30 HPA being caused by this second warming of the stratosphere over North Pole. This one's centred more towards the west of Russia, but it does infiltrate into the North Pole as well. This is what's forecast to happen by the GFS over the next few days. So gradually temperatures lowering. They will continue after this little tick up to start ticking down day by day, slowly becoming colder at 10 HPA over the North Pole. And by the time we get through to the end of the GFS run, actually it's turning really quite cold there over the North Pole. The blue colours are resuming our gathering. So things are beginning to get a lot colder by the end of the GFS run, by the end of January. At 10 HPA. That takes us to 25th of January. Of course, by then, we'll be looking to take that warmth that we have had in the stratosphere down into the troposphere and to promote high pressure. Zonal winds are going to stay in reverse for the next week or so as well. This is from weatheriscool.com. Lots of different coloured lines here that I haven't got time to show you. But if you want to know what all of these lines are showing, then have a look at winter updates, as we feature these charts every week in winter updates from September through to the end of November, and we explain in winter updates what each individual line is showing. What you really need to know is that the black line here, that's kind of like the trend line for the zonal winds, so it's a strong point of the year in terms of the strength of the zonal winds. Are about at their strongest at the moment. They should be. This is where we are right now. So right now we are well below average. We're well below that black line, so much weaker zonal winds. In fact, they have gone into reverse. They've been in reverse for a few days, and the green lines here are the GFS ensembles, and they're forecasting the zonal winds to stay in reverse, certainly for the next week, possibly going back up towards neutral, which is zero. This zero line just here, possibly going back towards there in the second week. But certainly very, very weak zonal winds being forecast by the GFS and its ensembles for the next week or two, way below average, telling us that there is still time for the troposphere to respond to this sudden stratospheric warming. This is from the ECMWF at the University of Berlin website, and again it's telling us the strength of zonal winds at both 10 and 30 HPA. So the blue line here is 10 HPA. Again, showing that the zonal winds are in reverse at the moment and going to stay in reverse for certainly the next few days. By the time we get through to the end of the ECMWF run, which is taking us to around there, kind of like in 10 days' time or so, we do see that we're going back towards neutral again. It's a slight recovery in the zonal winds in around 10 days' time taking place, but still much weaker than where we was before the sudden stratospheric warming, which was around there. Doesn't look like winds are going to reverse. The zonal winds are going to reverse at 30 HPA, a little bit lower down, but they are going to remain very weak and indeed much, much weaker than you would expect them to be. So, zonal winds within the stratosphere are going to remain much weaker than average for the next week to 10 days. This still allows time for the sudden stratospheric warming that occurred at 10 HPA and then moved down to 30 HPA to get into the troposphere and start to promote high pressure and northern blocking. We should wait and see and keep looking for signs within model output. We'll go on to that very shortly. Has been a mild start to January. This is the central England temperature from Hadley, provisional up to yesterday, 8th of January. We're sitting at 4.8 degrees, an anomaly of 1.3 degrees above average, provisional to yesterday, the 8th of January. That's been very up and down. It started off at the first day for New Year's Day. That started off above 8 degrees Celsius, exceptionally mild. Then by around the 4th of January, it had gone down to kind of like 3.3 or 3.2, I think, at its lowest. So a big crash took place between like New Year's Day and the 4th of January, and now it's popped back up again. So now we're sitting at over a degree above average. Very up and down for the first week of January with the central temperature, but still coming out a little bit on the milder than average side. That'll probably tick down again, actually, over the next day or so. Excuse me. So we move on to the GFS temperature and precipitation ensembles, and we're looking at Cardiff today. Someone has asked me to have a look at the ensemble for Cardiff. Now, I've asked for you to come up with your places that you would like us to look at for the ensemble section of these video updates. And as always, the response has been absolutely tremendous. So we have loads and loads of different places now to look at. We've got, for instance, Barnstaple, Poole, High Wycombe, Glasgow, Loughborough, Irby, London, Penzance, Uttoxeter, Bradford, Longstown, Isle of Wight, Preston, South Oakendon, Birmingham, Leeds, Grimsby, Sheffield, Chesterfield and Accrington, all to get through. So that's around 3 weeks worth now of places to look at with the GFS temperature and precipitation ensemble graph. So if you would like your location to be featured within the video updates, then do let me know. Probably won't be able to take any more suggestions for the time being. We're going to get through these ones that we've got so far. So we've got around 3 weeks worth now to get through. So if you would like, though, your location to be added to the list, do let me know, and we'll put you on the list. But it's going to take a little while to get to you, because as I say, we've got around 3 weeks worth of locations. But starting us off on the list is Cardiff. So we're looking at Cardiff today. The red line here is the 30-year upper air temperature average for Cardiff, and we see for the next few days going to be above average with the upper air temperature. So we're starting off around there, a little bit on the cool side, but they're going to be lifting up through the rest of the week and into weekend. Actually quite mild into weekend and start of next week. Then through the course of next week, we've definitely got a cooling trend. There we go. We see that most of these ensemble members are going underneath the red line. So it's certainly turning cooler. Not a huge amount of evidence that it's turning very cold. There are a few very cold outliers. So we've got these down here, but again down to around -10 at 850 HPA. They are pretty cold ensemble members, to say the least. They'd be bringing sort of like ice days. If you get down to -10 at 850 HPA in January, you'll start seeing temperature staying below freezing all day on the surface. They'll be bringing hard frost and probably snow as well. However, most of the ensemble members don't go that low. Most of them are between -5 and -10, which is certainly cold. It's certainly a lot colder than what we've had through this winter, but also quite unsettled, which is interesting. So in terms of the precipitation part of the ensemble for Cardiff, we see that over the next few days, that's around the 15th of January, very dry, remains very dry indeed. But then after that, into second half of January, back comes the precipitation spikes, increasingly unsettled flavour to weather. Bear in mind, this is for Cardiff, so it is exposed a little bit to the rain bands coming in off the Atlantic of the Irish Sea, but nevertheless, it is a good indication that from around the 15th, 16th of January onwards, it does look like it's turning more unsettled. But at the same time, it's turning colder as well, which is quite an unusual combination. Usually when it's unsettled in winter, it'll tend to be quite mild. But this looks like we're going from dry mild to wet cold, which is, as I say, it's quite unusual. That normally if it's dry, it's cold, and if it's wet, it's mild in the winter. But certainly more unsettled, a lot more unsettled, and also cooler or even colder as we're going into the third week of January. But perhaps not a suggestion yet, but it's turning very cold from classical sort of northern blocking. Temperature anomalies for the weekend looking like that from the 9th to 17th of January. They're coming out a little bit milder than average for the UK and the island too. So relatively mild conditions in the weekend and also dry. Any change to unsettled conditions is after the 15th. So this is the anomaly from the 9th to the 17th. So still a lot drier than average. Away from the far north of Scotland anyway, where it does look a little bit more unsettled up there. Most places are still coming out with this combination of dry and mild conditions, which, as I say, in winter, that is a relatively unusual combination. So this is how the GFS is looking for Saturday then. This is the 6 o'clock run of the GFS with high pressure just centred to our southwest. We're bringing in these westerly winds across the country as we go through to the weekend, the end of the weekend, start of next week. Gradually, this high pressure is getting eroded as low pressure continues to develop out in the northwest. So by the time you get through to the middle of next week, this is Wednesday, 16th of January, you've got quite a deep area of low pressure across the northern part of Scotland. That's bringing heavy rain and strong winds to Scotland as the high pressure to the south, the heights, are beginning to not go away, but certainly beginning to weaken a little bit. Running up to more extended range, again, increasingly unsettled look to the weather. Really, so low pressure again, it's deepening to the north of Scotland, it's bringing in rain bands, but we're up to day 10, which is or a little bit beyond day 10, which is Sunday 20th of January. We're still not really getting rid of these ridges to our south. Even a little bit beyond day 10, we still have a little bit of high pressure to our south. This is certainly not setting up a classic blocked northern blocking type pattern up to day 10. In more extended range, it turns quite cold and stays fairly unsettled as well. We align the jet stream on what looks like a northwest-southeast alignment with these areas of low pressure moving in from off the Atlantic. So yes, it will turn quite a lot colder, and there would be wintry potential in with some of these areas of low pressure, particularly for northern parts of the country. I mean, that one just there on the 21st of January, that's putting down quite cold air from the north. So it would be a bit of wintry potential with that. Snow certainly possible up in the north, as that area of low pressure is diving south. But again, it's not a classic northern blocking pattern. That's what we're looking for after this southern stratospheric warming. And that is what the longer range model output, like the extended 30-day ECM, and also the CFS V2, and we'll come on to CFS in a moment. That's what the extended range output is showing. Proper northern blocking setting up around Greenland. But you'll notice on this GFS run anyway, up to 384 hours, we still have these blue and purple colours here up to our north. So there's no real area of high pressure over Greenland or over the Arctic either up to the end of the GFS run. It's just that we sort of send the jet stream on the northwest-southeast alignment, start to pull some colder air in with those areas of low pressure from the northern Atlantic, which was probably enough to produce some transitory snow anyway for northern parts of the country, but it certainly isn't locked in real cold blocked conditions, which is being hinted at anyway by some of the longer range model output at the moment. ECMWF is looking like that. So again, on Saturday, the high pressure just to our southwest, relatively mild over the weekend with winds coming in from off the Atlantic. Into next week, it's turning gradually increasingly more unsettled. So that's Wednesday next week, 16th of January. Looks as though low pressure is beginning to bring wet and windy weather across many parts of the country, which is quite a big change in itself. Never mind cold weather, we have had it very, very dry since Christmas Eve. So that's quite a big change in terms of going from dry to unsettled conditions by the 16th of January with rain starting to come back in from off the Atlantic. We go into more extended range. We try to build a little bit of a ridge over the country within quite cold air, but that's how we finish up at day 10, which is Saturday the 19th of January. Very wet and windy, heavy rain and gales are sweeping in from off the Atlantic, and we bring some quite cold air in from the northern Atlantic with that as well. If you have a look at the upper air temperatures, you'll see that whilst there is a warmer sector through the UK with a warm front, actually pretty cold air is following along behind that area of low pressure, so there will probably be a little bit of wintry potential coming in behind that low on the 19th of January. But again, we're up to day 10, and once more, there's no real sign of northern blocking. There's no real sign of, and when we get northern blocking on these charts, you know it's true northern blocking because you get yellow colours appearing across Greenland and to the north, and there's no real sign of that up to day 10. So it remains a very confused picture, really, this, with the shorter range model output just not really going anywhere near to northern blocking, whilst the longer range output, I say we will go on to CFS V2 shortly, but longer range output wants to develop classical northern blocking signatures, certainly by the final week to 10 days of January. These are the built ensembles from the ECMWF. So each one of these green lines is depicting an individual ECMWF ensemble member. We can see a cooling trend here. This is for built in Holland. So it's a little bit to the east of us, but it is still relevant for the kind of temperature anomalies we can expect in this country. So you see the temperatures are holding up quite nicely. The scale is along the side. So that's 10 degrees just there. That's 5 degrees. That's freezing. That's minus 15. That's minus 10. Down there. So you'll see that over the next week it looks like temperatures are staying up quite nicely around 10 degrees Celsius, no problems there, but there's a definite cooling trend being seen here within the ECM ensembles. As we're going further out, you'll see the trend is downwards. It takes a little while, but the trend is definitely downwards. So by the time you get through, it's kind of like these days at the end, 21st, 22nd, 23rd, 24th of January, in De Beeld, anyway, in Holland, quite a few of the ensemble members and the ensemble mean are struggling to get much above freezing then. So definitely going from like 10 degrees in the next week down to struggling to get much above freezing as we get through into the third week of January. So that is quite a big change. This black dash line, that is the control, the ECM control run, and that's dropping down into the freezer. That's going for way below freezing maximum and severe minimum temperatures. So few hints there within the ECM ensembles that things are turning colder as we get through to the third week of January. This is how the postage stamps are looking. So this is kind of like grouping together all of those individual ECM ensemble members and creating kind of like a mean chart out of all of them. We actually got a split within the ECM ensembles at day 10. So we've got 27 ensemble members, including the operational and control runs that have low pressure to the north and northeast of the UK, above average heights in the middle of the Atlantic, high pressures in the middle of the Atlantic, and they're quite cold and unsettled scenarios. There's another 24, so it's roughly a 50-50 split. Number 24 with low pressure more towards the northwest of Scotland, the ridge in the central part of the Atlantic again, but these ones are milder with more of a westerly flow coming in from off the Atlantic Ocean. That's at day 10, but at 2 weeks away, 360 hours, which takes us to the 24th of January. We've got 22 ensemble members with the below average heights over to the southeast of the country and a blocking signal. This is more like what we're looking for, high pressure to be getting going around Greenland. So those ones are producing a mid-Atlantic ridge and taking that mid-Atlantic ridge up to Greenland, seemingly probably extending it back into the North Pole itself. So these are cold and wintry, and it includes the control run of the ECMWF. So the reason on the debuilt ensemble, the control run of the ECM gets so cold in those final days, like the 21st, 22nd, 23rd, 24th of January. Reason that happens is because the control does actually today develop a classic northern blocking feature to the north of the country and takes a low pressure to the south, and so consequently pulls in those very cold northerly or even northeasterly winds. We've got another 17 members of the ECM ensembles that have a mid-Atlantic ridge, but don't get that ridge as far up towards Greenland. They do have the below average heights to the east and southeast of the UK, but these are just that little bit more sort of Atlantic based with the air mass. So they are chilly, but they're not as cold as the 22 ensemble members that we have just there. And then finally we have number 12 that have the high pressure more centred towards Newfoundland over here, and then they have low pressure and below average heights to the east and northeast of the UK. So these ones could be northerly, but with no real blocking signature at all to our north. So the ECM ensembles are split between whether we're going to generate a northern blocking feature and then how cold we're going to get it. Finally, CFS V2 is looking like this. So these are 500 milliwatt heights broken down into week periods. The first week period will take us from the 9th to the 15th of January. The coming week has the above average heights remaining very, very close to us. Below average heights through the east of Europe. That's where winter's biting with that trough of low pressure just there. But we're under this ridge, sitting just a little bit to the west of the UK, keeping us dry and quiet. This is week 2. It's the 16th to the 22nd of January, with the below average heights then backing into central and western and northwestern parts of Europe. The above average heights are pulling out into the middle of the Atlantic. That's a pattern change. It's cold. It's not desperately cold. Not true Arctic or Siberian air being brought in, but it certainly is more unsettled, A, and B, it's certainly quite a lot cooler, and there would be some wintry potential coming in with that as well in week 2. But it's week 3, but it starts to get even more interesting. This is the 23rd through 29th of January, and the CFS is still trying to take that area of high pressure up towards Greenland. So we've got a mid-Atlantic ridge, but it's extending it to Iceland and to Greenland. The low pressure is through central parts of Europe and into the south of Europe. So that would be pulling down a northeasterly wind, northeasterly type wind. That could be genuinely cold and wintry. It's been a consistent signal from the CFS V2 for this week, like the 23rd, 29th January, so going up to the final week of the month. Been a consistent signal for several days now from the CFS to be producing these cold synoptics for the final stages of January. And then this goes on into week 4 too. So this is the 30th of January to the 5th of February. Real northern blocking around Greenland, extending back into the North Pole, the below average heights over and to the south of the UK. There's nothing else that can happen other than we pull down cold or even very cold northerly or northeasterly winds. And so again, that does look pretty cold and wintry, I have to say. There's no getting around it. CFS is definitely still going for very cold and wintry conditions through the final week of January and into like the first week or so, first few days anyway, of February. Temperature anomalies with the CFS V2 from the 9th to 15th of January are milder than average in the week ahead, substantially so, but then a change takes place in the 16th to the 22nd of January, where it goes colder than average for the UK. Temperatures dropping across the board, across Europe. It's not very cold at this point, but it is certainly a lot colder than compared to week 1. And then by the time we get through to week 3, we are in very cold conditions. 23rd, 29th of January, as we get genuine northern blocking, we find that the temperature goes much colder than average for the UK, kind of like 2.5 to 3 degrees below average. Most parts of Europe being plunged into the freezer, going under 3 degrees below average, or more than 3 degrees below average. Very cold in the final week of January, bitterly cold, and there would be, if it got as cold as that, there would be a prospect of widespread and disruptive snow, not just for the UK, but for much of Northern Europe too. And these cold conditions then carry on into week 4, the 30th of January to the 5th of February, much colder than average for the UK, much colder than average for most parts of Europe. Not quite as cold, as intensely cold as week 3, but certainly cold enough, and a kind of prolonged 2-week cold spell being forecast there. So it remains quite a mystery, this. We've got the longer range output, certainly the CFS, still very, very keen to turn things cold. And I know a lot of you think that the CFS never goes for cold weather, but the CFS is what you've got to bank on. If you want it cold and wintry, that is producing really cold and wintry conditions in weeks 3 and 4. And it starts as early as week 2. So we've got the long range output still very much set on turning things a lot colder through the final week to 10 days of January and carrying it on into the start of February. It would be in line with what you would expect to see after a major warming of the stratosphere over the North Pole, with propagation into the troposphere and reversal of the zonal winds, and a split of the polar vortex, which we did have very briefly a few days ago over the North Pole at 10 HPA. So all of that is in line with what you expect to see. But the shorter range output, it's just not really going for it yet. The GFS wants to turn things cooler. Yes, it is turning things cooler, even colder, you would say, I suppose. And a little bit of wintry potential as those areas of low pressure align themselves northwest to southeast with the jet stream. But no genuine blocking feature to support sustained cold weather. There's not really much sign of it on the ECMWF at day 10 either, but we did see from the postage stamps that a little bit after day 10, the ECM is starting to pick up on maybe the chance of raising the heights around Greenland. So we're going to be looking for height rises around Greenland within the shorter range model output and ensembles. I would keep your feet well and truly on the ground for now until we start to see the shorter range models coming into line with this idea of getting the height rises around Greenland, or it doesn't have to be Greenland, it could be Scandinavia, but anyway, within the northern latitudes, till the shorter range model output starts coming around to the idea of getting significant high pressure within the northern latitudes. I think we need to stay cautious about it. It's very interesting that the CFS is consistently going for this cold, blocked weather, but I want to see this coming into the shorter range model output now, and not just being kept restricted within the long range models and kind of like at the very extended end of the GFS runs in the 300 plus hour time frame. So still a lot of questions to answer about this, and we're going to keep you posted on it throughout the week, and we'll just see where we go. So there'll be more updates coming up tomorrow, so come back for that then. We may do an ensembles watch tomorrow evening, because I've only got one video to do tomorrow, which will be the regular week 10-day video update. I know a lot of you are waiting for Ensembles Watch. I never really thought Ensembles Watch would become particularly popular, but it seems to be one of the most popular videos that we do. But I can only do it when I've got time in the evening. But as I've only got one video to do tomorrow, I may do Ensembles Watch for you tomorrow evening. Friday, JMA Friday, of course, so we'll find out whether the JMA is in line with the CFS with this cold weather. And very gradually we will get further on into the month and we'll be able to hopefully start pinning down some colder and more wintry conditions, if that's what you want, and not everybody does, of course. Right, that's all for now. Check out 5-day forecast if you have time. That's all for now, and thanks for watching.